kind of went into the program in my 20s. Formal term was called multi-discipline vulnerability assessing back then, and that's when we'd go out for 2-week missions to various bases around the continental U.S., overhearing technological advances and things like this. Yeah, we heard that all the time. We were hearing things from a laboratory that the humans are not, that's us, are not allowed in when the tall whites and the grays are in the room. That, yeah, there is a presence. They do seem to be working with the program, or some of them are. The tall whites and the grays were exiting and done with their part of the test in the lab. And it was highly managed as well, because the NHI did not want to give us a weapons system, but they helped us in other ways where they kind of helped. Yes, they are very human looking. They are taller than us. They live through about 700 or 800 years old. When they get older, they do tend to grow very tall, perhaps tall white or hybrid that I bumped into in the desert. So yeah, I would say that I probably met one of the probably younger of their species face to face.
Jason Sands has recently emerged as a UFO whistleblower, claiming to have knowledge about government UFO programs and extraterrestrial encounters. Sands shared his experiences with the UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, and explained his reasons for becoming a whistleblower. He emphasized the importance of more whistleblowers coming forward and the need for public support in UFO disclosure. However, it's important to note that Sands' credibility has been questioned. He initially appeared on Twitter Spaces rather than through more traditional media channels has raised some eyebrows. Additionally, some of his statements, such as claiming to work closely with David Grush, another prominent UFO whistleblower, and referring to him by an unusual nickname, have been met with skepticism.
2 weeks before David Grush did, he was actually going through his ICIG process, so he had to come in a little bit later due to some legal things that he had to go do, because I was different. I was not pursuing a formal legal ICIG complaint or anything like that, but he was. So I ended up going in and testifying before he did in 2022, or when they were signing the NDAA. Kind of went into the program in my 20s. I was very much just a young man, thought I was doing something cool. I really didn't have an opinion one way or the other about UAP or anything else, really. I just was doing my job. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, kind of a person. And kind of went through that. I think my revelations, after a couple of years of doing the job, I started to think about things more deeply. And then further on down the line, it did affect me. And also, just knowing you're not alone is just as, sobering as anything else, where, you think, well, if they're here, why don't they want to speak to us, like brothers and sisters would from other life? And it makes you wonder. And yes, that's what I did. It was called the formal term was called multi-discipline vulnerability assessing back then, and that's when people like myself and the 3 other intelligence analysts would go out for 2-week missions to various bases around the continental U.S., like Eglin, White Sands, Wright-Patterson, all those kind of different places. Anyway, we would plug into the telephones and we'd listen to the directors, the leaders, the scientists, the engineers, and all those kinds of things. And there's a fine line there when it comes to what's classified and confidential. Overhearing technological advances and things like this. Yeah, we heard that all the time. There was a distinct difference, though, when you're talking about the NHI tech, or exotic tech is what I consider it, because it was, sometimes it was just us working on things and making breakthroughs, and it was exotic in that frame of mind. But there were other times when we were hearing things from a laboratory, and they literally told each other that the humans are not, that's us, are not allowed in when the tall whites and the grays are in the room, or in the control room, and things like this. So there was a distinct non-code word reference that we're talking about species of people being, humans on one side are not allowed in the lab until the NHI, or the tall whites and the grays, were exiting and done with their part of the test in the lab. And it was highly managed as well, because the NHI did not want to give us a weapons system, but they helped us in other ways where they kind of helped to set up the lab environment so we could get a clean test. Like, if we're doing stealth technologies and stuff like that, they would, try to help us to make sure we got a nice clean signal and data, those kinds of things. It was highly managed by the tall whites and the grays, because they just run that way. So it's kind of it's not a free-for-all technology exchange on that part. But yeah, there's other stuff that we're all working on as well, with different high-tech stuff and other things that are weapon systems that are classified that I would not discuss, those kinds of technologies. Yeah, I had a Q clearance. That's something that's still in the systems, and anybody can look up that, yeah, there is a presence. They do seem to be working with the programmer. Some of them are. And yeah, some of the other whistleblowers were probably the source of some of that. And I do want to caveat that my presence in the program was only during the mid-1990s. So mine is more archival. I don't know what's happened since the 1990s until now inside the program. There are some that work with us, and I would say that the ones that work with us probably have a desire to be here in a way where maybe they see some resources here that are valuable to them, or for some reason they do find value in having an agenda with us that maybe perhaps they can't do elsewhere. And that's kind of a mystery to me as to what exactly caused them to enter into this. I don't think they would have succumbed to coercion if we had just captured one of their craft. I think it would have pissed them off, but I don't think that would have caused their race to, start doing technology exchanges unless there was some other sort of way that they got introduced to the program. So it's a bit of a mystery to me. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. Yeah, I think Mr. Hall did describe them more carefully than I did. Yes, they are very human looking. They are taller than us. I think the way he described it is that they live to about 700 or 800 years old. When they get older, they do tend to grow very tall, and that's the cause of their death, is because just like people here that have that problem with, they have like a gene that causes them to grow too tall. Eventually their heart just can't handle pumping the blood around their larger bodies. The same thing seems to happen with these tall whites. So they go through this life cycle when they're up to about 70 years of age, 100 years of age. They're about of average height, is what Mr. Hall describes. And that seems to be consistent with the perhaps tall white or hybrid that I bumped into in the desert. So yeah, I would say that I probably met one of the probably younger of their species face to face. Now, Mr. Hall seems to have had a lot more contact than I ever had. And I would say that, yeah, that's probably more his expertise than mine. But I do agree that after viewing his video, Mr. Hall, I would recommend anybody here interested in tall whites and grays, or at least tall whites, that Mr. Hall has I really find his story credible, because he has mentioned also some of the procedures there on the base that I also experienced, and he described them to a T. As for the telepathy, to describe it audibly, he was speaking another language, but I've tried to describe it before, and I'll repeat it here, and that is, when I'm speaking to you now, since we're all speaking the same language, we're attaching meaning to words very quickly with our brains, whether we're receiving or we're the ones who are talking at the time. So communication is very, very quick. And when I think back to the time when he was talking to me in this other language, it was like a very quick kind of knowing what he was going to say before he said it feeling. In other words, I got the understanding of the words just before he was speaking them in his language. And the meanings seem to be exactly the way I understand meanings for words myself. So there's something that goes on either in my brain or the way that their brains are. Maybe we're exactly the same when it comes to our communication on that telepathy level. It felt just like, my own thoughts were coming and going, but I had to have the wherewithal to know when say like emotions were displayed in some of the way that we talk back and forth. That yeah, I felt a strong emotion of disgust at one point because I mentioned him looking for some things that I mentioned a group of people that he didn't like, and I was like, well, I'm not disgusted with these people. That thought, that emotion must be coming from him, but I had to have that wherewithal to know that I wasn't feeling that. However, it did feel just as if I was feeling it as well as he was feeling it. So there's an emotional level there that's very raw and very synchronized when you're at that level of telepathy. And then the communication is more of a conscious effort of relaying information. So the emotional and the, I guess, spoken part of the telepathy are kind of on two different levels mentally. And that's how I would describe it. There's always been a group of people within probably the Department of Defense or within one of the military services that probably carries the moniker that used to be MJ-12, if that's what they started off with. They might interface with mentally or physically, or maybe it's a combination of both. I think it's probably a combination of both, in my experience. Now, I'll speak more of that after James Fox's film comes out. There's a part of the with their onboard, systems and things like this. And I believe there's some folks that mentioned, who are also people that were around during Roswell. That was before I was born. But they also claimed that it was a radar system that, hit these craft and it actually downed them. And have since, the NHI have figured out a way not to, or to insulate their ships and craft so that it's not interfering with them anymore. But that's just as much as I know about it. But it's just because of microwaves and high frequencies that seem to interfere with their craft. The world religions now are going to have to look at the texts and the manuscripts again in a new light, that perhaps these were actually eyewitness accounts of interactions in our ancient past that were part of a more overt way that they were contacting us in our ancient past. But now it seems like we're in a lull where they've left us alone for quite a while.